I think that if I had community, like I had somebody who really liked the marketing and business development in a way that I just don't anymore, I think this could be $1 million business with just a few more people, and it could be exceedingly profitable. And that would be, that's where I'm aspiring to be at this stage in my career is, let's get to that mid 7-figure range for a while.
Welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. I'm super delighted today. I get to hang out with a new friend, John Bates. And so we're going to do a coaching session today. So John's going to bear it all for us as much as he's comfortable. We're going to hear about his business and his goals, and I'm going to hopefully give him some great value and a great strategic marketing plan to meet those goals. So John came my way probably over a year ago from a good friend, Eric Collette. Eric is a client of ours at 7-Figure Leap. He's been through our podcast guesting program. And as you get to hear John's story, I think you'll understand why Eric's like, you guys should really know each other. So, John, I know you have multiple businesses, and we talked a little bit before we hit record. How do we want to kind of focus on this? So feel free to mention kind of all the things, but I'd love to know in a couple minute synopsis, sort of like a snapshot of your business story today, and then we'll start getting into the details from there.
Okay, so since you said story, I'll tell you a quick story because I think it gives a lot of context that's important and useful. So I was always the guy with the soft skills, and I always worked with people in my whole professional life who had the hard skills. And so I was always going to conferences, speaking at conferences, doing business development, managing the relationships. And I was always a founder or a co-founder or an early stage employee at .com companies, starting in 1994. And I raised several $100 million with my various teams in Silicon Valley and beyond. But the people that I was paying, would say, oh, John, he does the fluffy stuff, right? So I went around with this chip on my shoulder trying to prove I was valuable. And I secretly didn't think I was valuable, and it was just awkward. And then in 2009, I went to the TED conference for the first time. And I just saw person after person give the most unbelievable talks I had ever seen. And I remember having two big simultaneous realizations, one kind of good, one kind of not so good. So the first one was, wow, that's powerful. Call it fluffy if you will, but that kind of public speaking is super powerful. So for the first time in my adult life, I actually got a sense that I brought some value. I was like, okay, well, so what I do does have some value, right? But then I also realized that even though I thought I was really good as a public speaker, and even though I had always been the best speaker or one of the best speakers, I was speaking at tech conferences, So like, I'm the best of the worst, woo, So I came back from TED and I was really humbled, and I decided I wanted to figure out what made this whole thing cook. I was like, okay, I am nowhere near as good as I could be at this, and I'm taking it on. So at one of the first ever TEDx events, my friends that I'd met at TED, I was volunteering for them. And we had this guy who had all the hard skills in the world. I was waiting for him all day. And when he got up on stage in the afternoon and started to speak, everybody in the audience checked out because he was so nervous and awkward. We all thought we were going to throw up for him. And so at first I was genuinely sad. That's the guy I was waiting for, right? And then I actually started to think about it, and I got kind of mad because I thought about what that must have cost me at all my companies to have people like that, which we did, right? Super brilliant, but couldn't communicate very well internally or externally. And then the evil part of me popped out, and I was sitting there quietly to myself going, hard skills guys blowing it, calls what I do fluffy, meaner, neener, And as I was doing that, my buddy Michael Weiss came over and leaned down and said, dude, we got to do something to help people like this. And I was just like, whoa, so I went home that night, started working on what, Mike and I created it together, and then I ran with it. And it just completely changed my life. That completely changed my life. And so I started doing that coaching for some of the TEDx Southern California organizers, just pro bono. And then I immediately started getting asked to come into the companies of all the people that were speaking. Like they got the coaching from me for TEDx, and they were like, "Will you come do that for my company?" So I very quickly got pulled into places like Johnson and Johnson, and then I met the folks from NASA, and they had me train the astronauts, and like so. It was amazing what happened. Like I owe Ted and TEDx a lot, and I owe Mike Weiss for saying that.
You found a lot of resonance too. I mean, giving yourself some credit as the soft skill guy, you knew how to communicate to the hard skills people and be that bridge. And obviously, you found a lane and really ran into it. That's fantastic. So yeah, please complete the thought.
Here's the reason that that happened, I think, and I wouldn't have thought of it any other way. But when I went home that night after Mike said that, I was like, okay, I got to base everything I do as much as I can in the science of communication. And I had a strong interest in evolutionary biology. I had a strong interest in the neurobiology of communication. I studied at UCLA, and I got to do a bunch of upper division classes as an underclassman. And so like I had all this stuff, but I never put it together. I put it together and it was magic. And I based everything as much as I could in science and made it principles based learning. So it's easy to remember. And what started happening is these hard skills people would understand not only what they needed to do, which they were resisting, but also why they needed to do it. So they stopped resisting. And then they because they understood it and was principles based and in their language, they started doing things really well. They got way more creative. They got way more confident. They got way more relaxed. It actually turned into fun for them. And, so I think we're going to talk about it later. The upside and the downside is I've had a 15-year, like all pure word of mouth business and just have never really figured out the other side of marketing. So I want to do that now, but I'm honored that I was able to find something that would do that for me, right? That was lucky on some level.
Sure. Well, you may or may not know this. My background's in engineering. I was one of those hard skills people, but fortunately for me, I did develop and really work on soft skills, and in large part through marriage and marriage ministry, and that really served me well in that career. And it's part of kind of the bridge over into the marketing and the work that I do now. So I very much relate to this dynamic that you're talking about. And when you're like, I brought science in, and once they understood why, then they were really into it. I'm like, oh, that's totally me, like, so I love that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Right.
So yeah, so we're going to get into the weeds here a little bit on the business. So if people want to kind of follow along, like what would be the name or the URL for this main business, your personal business here?
So, I've kind of like, is another thing that I'm kind of working through, but I've got executive speaking success, which kind of says what it is. And then I also have johnbates.com because I wanted to sort of separate out myself as a keynote speaker and a personality, and have executive speaking success be really focused on what that name is, that aspect of my business. But I wanted to be able to have people find me because, people always call me John Bates, like it's one thing. Oh, John Bates. So I'm like, okay, I need to be findable.
That's a good domain to get. So you have johnbates.com. So that's more of the personal brand. If I want to hire John to come be the keynote guy, that's that brand. Executive speaking success.com is your training, coaching company. So obviously they connect and they feed each other, but it sounds like executive speaking success is sort of the main focus today, getting more clients, more repeatable clients for that business. So yeah, give us a snapshot, be as transparent as you'd like as far as revenue, but like it's really useful to look back the last 12 months to say, here's a revenue, number of clients, any team that you have, so we can kind of get a baseline of where you're coming from.
So, and I'm happy to do that. And I will tell you the short version. At the very end of 2022, I had a shoulder surgery because I hurt my rotator cuff and needed a shoulder surgery. It got infected. I didn't argue with the doctor to look more closely when he said, "Oh, you'll be fine." And like 2 months after I got the surgery, I couldn't lift my arm higher than this. And they put me on multiple hardcore antibiotics, did 3 debridement surgeries before we finally stopped it. I thought I might die. And what I didn't know, that I want everybody to know, is serious infections, especially when they're untreated for so long, are highly correlated with clinical depression, which I did not understand. And the antibiotics that I was on, these new, really powerful, good, save my life antibiotics, have a less common but not rare side effect of clinical anxiety. So in 2023, I spent the whole year unable to work, unable to, barely able to be with my wife and my son. And not to talk about it cavalierly, but like if I don't think if I didn't have my son and if I wasn't clear how awful it would have been for me to just off myself for him, I think I might have not made it through 2023. So 2023, I had pretty good income, maybe 250, 300,000 something, but I didn't really perform very well. And I didn't, I showed up for some of that stuff, missed some of that stuff, had to refund the money. Then 2024 was like a black hole. Like that was like, I didn't pay any taxes and I got a big refund, which is unusual. And but 2024, I put tons of money into flying to events and speaking on stages and just making myself visible again, because for 2023, I had been completely gone. And by the way, so I finally met a woman who had worked at the VA hospital as a therapist for her whole life. When she heard what was going on, she's like, John, okay, don't off yourself. I know you're thinking about it. You're going to be okay. Here's what's going on, right? Told me about the infection and depression, told me about the antibiotics and the anxiety. We decided I would get off the antibiotics a little bit earlier than they wanted me to. I was on for almost a year. And when I got off, I was better in 2 weeks. I was totally back. So it's crazy. I just want people to know, because like if you ever have anybody,
I'm glad you shared that. Are you a veteran?
my dad was a Marine and was wounded in Vietnam, and so I grew up in the Corps. And I do a ton of work with veterans, and I love veterans. But yeah, so I'm not a veteran, but I love veterans.
Same here. I didn't serve. My son's in the Army. My dad, my uncle, my brother, Army, Marines. It's all everyone every male at least in my family has been in the military. So you mentioned VA, so I asked that. But so 2022, before all this craziness with the shoulder and all the ensuing surgeries and antibiotics and depression, so it's like a $250,000 a year business. 2023, you're checked out. 2024, you're recovering and trying to get your name back on the map. And what's this year been like? We're sitting here in August of 25.
Yeah. So in August of 25, the last quarter of 2024 was pretty good. And then some of that flowed into the first, didn't show up in my accounts until the first quarter. I had a bunch of sales in the first quarter and it was looking ripper. And then the second quarter, it was just like crickets. And so I've been very purposefully focusing on a system now for a while, which is really hard for me. Like we've got Go High Level implemented. It's worked with a great team. It's still not perfect and I don't use it perfectly, but as I'm using it better and better, and as I'm being more conscious about my outreach in different avenues like LinkedIn, I'm starting to book a lot more calls, and that's just starting to happen right now. So now it's, I want more of that stuff, and it's starting to happen.
I really appreciate the transparency and the context, because that's super helpful. It's like you've had a word of mouth business for 15 years, as you described it. It was going really well, and then you had this setback, and a lot of times a medical setback in this case, but who knows what. A lot of times I hear these same stories. The top referral partner retired or got hit by a bus or got divorced or whatever, right? Or the economy or a tariff, or it's like when you don't have a predictable lead system, you're really at the mercy of a lot of factors that you can't control, and you're coming out of the other side of that. And sounds like you became very aware of that acutely because of this 2-year period. Q1's great. Hey, referrals are coming. It's like Q2 is completely dry. You didn't change anything, but just, circumstances or chance changed. So now you're like, hey, I need to get more serious about marketing, consistent lead generation. You've got High Level, which is a great platform and CRM and marketing engine. I use the same one. Also also took like 9 months to get onboarded with it. It is not a simple system, but it is good. And obviously you know, applied for this coaching session because you see some opportunities for podcast guesting, partnerships, other ways to feed the funnel that you're building with the high level team that you have. So is that all kind of a fair summary?
Yeah, and I don't want to skip over. Like, I really think podcast guesting is a huge thing for me, and I also think partnerships is something that I've been thinking about a lot. But I really like. There's got to be partners where if their people could be vastly better at communicating and public speaking, they would be thrilled that they brought me in. And I just haven't done enough thinking and asking to find that.
That's why we're here. So I'm excited to get there.
Yeah, which is super awesome. I'm so glad. Those are two things that are very high on my list and that, you know, I could use your help with. So,
well, to get us closer to pay dirt, I guess, on that stuff. So tell me a little bit on your current offer or offers. Like, what can people buy from you? How much does it cost? How do you deliver it?
I mean, I think my offers is another place where I really need to think harder about what I actually want to accomplish with my business and what really serves my clients. But just to add insult to injury on the like word of mouth, like I don't have a whole bunch of ongoing long-term like programs that I offer. I do have them, but I haven't made it a priority to try to engage over time longer with my clients. So the main thing that has been happening for me since COVID. I did a lot more in-person stuff before COVID, but I failed over pretty successfully into just one-on-one Zoom coaching, which thank heavens during the pandemic. And so what I have now is like a 3-month one-on-one coaching offering with I've got an online course. It's 3.5 hours long. It's fabulously well made because I had great help creating that. And I ask people to do that so that we have a common vocabulary and a common understanding. And then we do 3 months of one-on-one coaching, a minimum of every other week. And I help people with their origin story, with their TED-worthy talk. If they are a keynote speaker, if they're an executive, like we'll weave those things into what they're actually up to. And then I have a 6-month program where it's the same thing, but it's 6 months. And about halfway through, whenever the client wants, they fly in and we spend an afternoon and a morning together in that order. So we spend a full day together with a break of the evening in the middle. And that's a really, really popular one. And it's fabulous what we get done when they show up here and they're not in their office and all that kind of stuff. And then I've got a year-long program that is a one-on-one program where same thing, but I will fly out to them at no additional cost twice in the year and spend a day that they can split up between, they can use the entire day themselves. They could do the morning with their team and the afternoon just one-on-one with me. So, and when people, so like I have list prices, but I'll give you the costs that what the investment is right now. And I mostly, because it's word of mouth, I give people my best pricing because they came to me through somebody that I know. So, my list pricing is a little bit higher, but the one-on-one coaching for 3 months is $9,500. The one-on-one coaching for 6 months and they come in for a day in the middle is 17,500. And the year-long coaching where I go out for 2 full days is $40K.
That's the list price. And you might take some of that off for a sort of friends and family. Oh, that's the best price. Got it.
No, that's the best price. That's the bottom. Like yeah. So, and if somebody comes to me and they're a nonprofit, I may, I'll talk to them and they can give me a counter offer and explain their situation and we'll usually work that out. But those are like, that is what I'm actually charging and actually making right now on those things.
Good price points. So you got 3 month all virtual 9,500, 6 month virtual plus a full day VIP experience where they're coming to you, and you've got the 1 year where you're coming in to them twice. Could be with them with their team. It's obviously a much more deeper experience for 40K. And so whether it's year to date or going back to 2022, if you had to assign sort of like 10% do this, 20% do this, and 70% do this, like what do people typically purchase out of those three?
It skews very much to the 3 month and the 6 month. But then what happens is they'll do that with me, and then they'll come back in a few months and they'll hire me to come in and do a half day or a day or a 2 or 3 days with their team and stuff.
They want the team involved after they get the initial direct help. Yeah, it's great.
Exactly. Once they do the one-on-one with me, they usually want me to come in and just do it for the whole team.
Is that it? I mean, the offer stack right now is it's all one-on-one, and you can choose one of three durations that include more and more sort of intimacy and how tight you're able to work with them.
I mean, that is the majority of what I'm doing now. It's not the majority of what I think I should be doing now.
Yeah, that's gonna be my next question. But like right now, that's what you're doing. It's manageable. You can kind of take it as it comes because you don't have like the dynamics of a group or some of the other stuff that, okay.
Well, and then what my other offering is, I have like that online course is basically what I call the Speak Like a Leader boot camp, which is kind of a silly name. But what that is that set of principles and that set of understandings that all my coaching springs out of. So I've got a program anywhere from a half day to 3 days where will go into a company, and the experience is different depending on how many people, but it's a little more intimate and a little more interactive if it's a small group. If it's a big group, it's still interactive, it's just a little different. But I'll come in and do that Speak Like a Leader boot camp and build in some things like working with people on the team on their origin story. And we'll do some exercises live that are amazing, like an unbelievable listening exercise and another exercise that gives people access to controlling all of their unconscious, nonverbal facial and body language. And then if they want to do the full 3 day thing, then I've got a media training on the last day. And so companies will bring me in for that. And sometimes they'll have me do a half day or a full day with the entire company. And then I'll spend the next day with like maybe the 2 different leadership teams or the 3 different leadership teams or whatever. And then they might put their most public figures in that third day to do media training with me.
So you got the one-on-one, which is an individual purchasing it. Maybe in some case their company pays for it, but basically it's an individual wants John's help to be a TED-worthy communicator, which it sounds like it could be to actually go speak on stage, but it could also be as a leader within their own company or their own team.
Very much all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have this other, what I would call more the B2B offer, which is a company hires John to come in and do various workshops from a half day to a 3 day, different scales. And that's kind of a custom proposal probably for each one. But, is it same ballpark as far as revenue, as far as like how much for one full day of workshop, as an example, do you think?
Exactly. And what I shoot for there, yeah. So the half day workshop is 12.5. And since I got to fly there anyway, and I want to make it easy for people, I give them the full day for 15 grand. And then if they want to add on another day, it's 12. And if they want to do a third day, I might give them a little bit more of it off of the 2 days additional.
And so focusing on the one-on-one offer, we've danced around this a little bit already, so I have a pretty good sense. But in your words, who's the ideal client profile for that? Like who? And sometimes people struggle with this. So if you're like, I don't know how to describe it, I would say think of your favorite 3 clients from the past 3 or 4 years and describe them to me.
So I mean, I think that it is a little bit. It's kind of interesting to me how different the people that are coming into me for this are. But I think that if I look across the vast majority of people I've worked with one-on-one, it is first of and foremost, it's business leaders who there are two things. There's either the business leaders who kind of get dragged in because they've got great analytical skills, but they don't have very good emotional intelligence. So they kind of get dragged in and told they're going to have to work with me. And that always works out. That has always worked out, because once they get where I'm coming from and that I respect them and that this is going to be fun and useful, they're into it.
Plus, in that case, they're probably not paying for it, right? Their company's paying for it. So they're like, yeah.
Yeah, no, their company's paying for it. Yeah. And then the other one is the high rank, like the high level leader who's already super good, but is the kind of person that wants to always be better. And I love that, right? The optimizers. So, because I've had a number of clients when they called me to work with them and said they thought I was the guy. I was like, dude, what can I ever do for this guy?
Hey, you're so much better than me. How am I going to teach you, right? I have that sensation sometimes.
Right. But I keep reminding myself if Tiger Woods coaches could have beat him at golf, they would have. Right. But because of them, and because he was coachable and pulling it towards him, he beat everybody for what seemed like forever. So I go in and I've been able to make a difference every time, even despite my little conversation before. So, and that's who I love to work with. I love to work with people who are just hungry, who are good, whatever stage they're at, who are just interested in being better. And it's usually C-level, VP level at companies like Boston Scientific and Johnson & Johnson and Google and Intuit. Then there's also a group of just entrepreneurs, and they could be very small companies. They could be, SMEs in the classic definition. And so they realize, hey, wow, if I could talk to my team better, if I could talk to my clients better, if I could make more of an emotional connection, if I could be more inspiring, it would really help. And then there's just kind of there is a layer of people who they want to get on either a TEDx stage or they want to, and I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, if you pay me, I'll get you on a TEDx stage. Like that's unethical. Yeah. And that's unethical. Right. And I actually know the people at TED and they know me and I'm not going to do that. So, but I will help people be TED worthy. And so I've got a lot of authors and I've got a lot of experts and I've got a lot of people who've got a message that have come to me and wanted me to help them hone that. And, just to be really clear, I love to get in as early as I can on any of these things. Like if we've got the annual sales conference coming up, or if you've got a TEDx talk coming up, I would love to get in as soon as possible because I help people soup to nuts, right? Like, okay, what's the idea? What is it you want to communicate? What do you want them to leave thinking about and feeling? And then we craft it together. And then I help them figure out how to deliver it really well and the strategic messaging on it. So I like to be early in with all of those different people on what they're working on.
That's interesting. So you've got, kind of think of it sort of like a matrix. You've got by identity, you've got like business leaders, and it's sort of the subset of they're drugged there because they're really smart technical people, and someone else is like, you got to figure out how to talk to our people better. You're ruining the culture.
Yeah. They're like, we want you to be in the C level. Like we'd like to give you that raise, but dude, you gotta.
You need communication help. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Or there's the optimizers, but those business leaders are there. Then you got the entrepreneurs, and then you got the, what I'll call like the stage pursuers who are some sort of expert, subject matter expert. They really want to be TED worthy. And for the sake of TEDx or conferences or, whatever, they want to be a professional speaker or have stage time. And so kind of three different identities with three different value propositions.
And they're, keynote speakers in there too. Very much. Yeah.
And so if we kind of 80-20 it and you're like, hey, I know I got business leaders, I got entrepreneurs, I've got these stage pursuers. I would say usually these are the same answer, but it could be who has paid you the most, but it could also be who you really like to work with. If you had to pick one of those three as a exercise, which one would you, if you could only work with one of those three, which one would you pick?
I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, I love working with all of them. I think that on the 80-20 rule, in terms of who has the funds, who can invest, who is going to make the biggest difference, like leveraged across their influence, it would probably be the business leaders. Not that I would want to say no to anybody, but that's, for whatever it's worth, I tried, I volunteered at the Boys and Girls Club when I was young, and my mom and dad made me stop after about a month because I just got big dark circles under my eyes and I stopped sleeping and I started getting depressed and weird because I just couldn't handle like what I saw those kids going through.
Yeah, you're a very empathetic person.
Yeah. And my sister, on the other hand, worked with autistic kids since she was in high school. And like she just wades into whatever situation and just freaking makes it better. And and she just, and like it doesn't bother her the same way it does me. I mean, I know she's committed to it and she cares, it just doesn't drag her down. So I read the book Power versus Force, got the idea of the logarithmic scale of human consciousness, and decided that my calling was to work at the highest level of consciousness that I could possibly operate at, and with people at that level because that's where the leverage is. And I'm just not very good at the other end, which I don't know how that makes me sound.
Makes you sound honest
I am honest. Yeah.
and in tune to your God-given abilities and your unique ability. I mean, some people would be so intimidated. Actually, most people would be so intimidated they would never want to face a business leader and try to teach them something. Like you kind of mentioned this dynamic of like, why the hell are you hiring me? Like you're so much more successful than me. You're more articulate already. They're Tiger Woods and you're Tiger's coach. But like you get that dynamic and you can step into that. I think many more people would rather be the Tiger coach, who's working with a municipal duffer who like, I'm way better than you myself. I can definitely help you, because there's that sort of self-confidence. So, and none of what you said sounded disparaging, but what I heard in that is your energy, your intuition, your working genius, your unique ability, however we want to categorize it, is sort of at the tip of the spear. It's like you thrive in helping the helpers, influencing the influencers. And so, and where I'm going with this on a marketing standpoint is we're not going to concurrently market to, in a bullseye sense, all three of these groups. Like we really need to pick one and realize that, hey, if we're in the dartboard of like really smart technical people who want to optimize their communication, all over that dartboard are entrepreneurs and authors and experts and people with day jobs, and but in the bullseye are C-suite and VP, or C-suite and VP worthy executives who need this help. And if we just focus our laser focus on that bullseye and we keep throwing darts at it, yeah, we'll hit some people all over the board. So you're still going to get other clients, in other words, but you're going to get a lot more of the thing we're aiming at, which is the bullseye. And so the key is like, you want to still be on the same board. So we don't want to, have a bullseye on one board, a bullseye on another board, and a bullseye on another board, which what I'm hearing, I think it makes a lot of sense. And also I think in the same breath, you mentioned earlier, you haven't really had a huge focus on like lifetime value of each client. It's like, hey, they come in, I work with them, they're really happy, and then I don't really have anything to offer beyond that. I think these business leaders, are they? You can confirm, but it sure sounds like they'd be the ones that would hire you then for a workshop or work with my team, or like there's a lot more lifetime value to a business leader than an individual author who's trying to get on a TEDx stage. Is that fair?
Exactly. That is a really good point. And it's not like I haven't fulfilled that life. Like I've got a lot of long-term clients. I just have not been making it a focus to offer that and focus on that, and which I think is a big mistake.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the prescriptions I'm going to have here shortly. Last thing I want to ask you, and then we'll talk more tactically about like what are some actual strategies for the marketing. Do you look at year 2026? We get to the end of the year, and you said, "Man, I'm really glad. I talked to Dustin. I'm really glad. All these other things kind of fell into place. Like I'm have the business of my dreams. This is awesome." Because you mentioned to me before the call, like you're married, you've got a younger son, and you want the predictability in your income, your energy levels, travel, all that stuff. And so in your words, like revenue wise, any other team additions, number of clients, like what would be the perfect business in 2026 for John?
It's a great question. And it's not like I haven't thought about it. I just haven't really figured it out yet. But what goes through my mind, if you think, I'll just tell you what goes through my mind, and hard to see the picture when you're in the frame, right? So, I would love to have, so I don't really want to grow. So I'm a one man band with a part time virtual assistant who is awesome. And that's basically it. I would, I don't, I don't have aspirations to grow this to some gigantic size. I wouldn't mind having a few more people on the team. Would love to have somebody that was super good at just making it rain, like a business development, sales, whatever person. Would love to have that work so well that I needed to pull in a few people and really train them up in my method and be able to shop them out, right? And have enough business that I could keep them busy and make that worth everybody's while. I'd love to have a community because I think there's so much power in that, both for the business owner and for the freaking community. Like I think of the people that I work with, if I could get them all together and just paying attention to each other, it just mind boggling what that would be like. And I think that that's also a really good, predictable revenue stream. And it's one of those things that I think I could provide ongoing great value that would be super fun for me, right? Because like I love being interested in everything that everybody's doing because I have total ADD that way. But I also love that I get to focus on something that I'm so passionate about and that I love and just keep bringing that, you know what I mean? And going deeper for people and they get value. So, and I would really like to, I really want to up my revenue. This business for me, the first year I went further in debt, and I was already 50 grand in debt. The second year I kind of broke even. The third year I made more than I ever made in my whole life. Then I doubled that plus.
That's a pretty common trajectory. So yeah.
Yeah. Then I tripled that plus, and I know that I can totally sustainably just by myself do at least 6 or 700,000 in revenue at a very, very profitable, in a very profitable way. So I think that if I had community, I had a little, I had somebody who really liked the marketing and business development in a way that I just don't anymore. I think this could be $1 million business with just a few more people, and it could be exceedingly profitable. And that would be, that's where I'm aspiring to be at this stage in my career is, let's get to that mid 7-figure range for a while, pay some people, not a big team, but a small team really, really well. And, be able to have people that would be filling in things so that I could have more time with my family and, have a little bit more say over my schedule.
I think that's all very doable. I think the 250-ish or wherever we're kind of, checking in coming out of the health crisis up to that 500 to 750. I think that's very doable solo with a part-time virtual assistant. It's my own story. And I'm kind of in that next phase that you're talking about where it's like, hey, let's add some redundancy to the fulfillment and let's add some other people that have their brain on the marketing and sales. And obviously then the top line goes up, the margins can shrink, and that's always a balancing act. But I think this is easily a $3 million business with the small team supporting it. And I think in that 1 year vision, a 500 to 750,000 solo plus VA, and maybe you're looking at adding the first key hire in that range. Does that all feel like, man, that would be a really fulfilling and good place to be? And I think key in that too is in that year, we'll call it 2026. There's a big difference between 500,000 and 250 came in 1 month. And then there was like a 0, 0, 0. And then there's another 100,000, which I feel like is kind of like this teeter totter you've been on, because that's the nature of a referral based business, right? You take it when it comes, and when it rains, it pours. And then sometimes there's a drought and you don't really have a spigot to control the two. So I think a $500,000 business that looks a lot more like 50,000 plus or minus 10 a month, or it's much more consistent. Maybe there's some seasonality with, summer and all that kind of stuff with your client base. Let's just call it 500,000. And then let's say you get this. I like your core offers. I definitely think there's a continuity offer and an ongoing community offer here, that we should include in the equation. But you got like the 9,500, the 17,500. You got the $40,000. I like to call like a slack adjuster offer, right? Where you got this. Not many people take it, but when they take it, it's like the people who buy an espresso machine at Starbucks, right? Like it's there, it's in line. No one wants to buy it, but the one person who buys it for $700 is like their profits went up for the day and they made a bunch of money. So I think it's a good price anchor, and it's good to have.
Yeah. And and I'm gonna take and I love those people and I take freaking great I take great care of everybody, but like they get those little special extra touches, right?
And if nothing else, it's a great price anchor. It's like we do have the $40,000 package, but if you're not ready for that, we got this one for 17.5, and now 17.5 sounds like a walk in the park. So it's great. I think you're where I'm getting at. I think your one-on-one offer stack is great. You obviously like to fulfill that. I think there's some scalable stuff we want to look at in the mix. But just in really rough numbers, let's say 15,000, use kind of an average client value for those one-on-one packages. Um, you know, and so if we only had one-on-one, what's that, like 30 clients a year would be 450,000. So like 40 clients a year, um, if that's all you had. And so that sounds a little heavy to me from a fulfillment. I mean, it's a new client almost a week. And so then if we say, well, maybe we only want 20 of those clients, right? So we want half our business to be one-on-one. And I'm obviously doing very rough math in real time, but I like to think of the offer ladder first and foremost about what you want, right? And so let's say we have half of our revenues from one-on-one clients. That's really feels really good, and we're at like even more than half, 300,000 from that. That's one client, two clients a month.
Yeah. That's simple.
Yeah. So two clients a month is half your revenue. It's what you're making now. And then the other half that we want to add basically, right, is what other offers can we have to fill a gap that you feel really good about and that doesn't require unique marketing to fill. Like it comes from the same marketing that fills the one-on-one. I think the workshops are already there. That's part of it, the corporate workshops. I definitely think there's a continuity mastermind membership thing here, and I want to touch on that in just a second. My question back to you, John: do you see a role in that mix that you would enjoy for group coaching, or do you think this is a one-on-one thing that you don't really want to get into having to manage groups?
No. I love group coaching. And I did a year-long group coaching program called the Live Like a Leader program when COVID hit. And I feel like it was really successful and I learned a lot. Like one thing I learned is that I could make it a guru based model where I show up every week with a new thing and all that. And that's cool and everything. And it makes me feel my ego is satisfied. But what I didn't realize till, far into it is how much more fulfilling and fun it would have been if I gave people responsibilities, even though they're paying to be in the group. They want to be expressed in that group and they want that group to know them and they want to bring their expertise to this group. And so I think that there's a less tightly held group coaching model that I could do that would be super fulfilling for people to be in and would require a lot less of my time than I thought it did, and it would be much more of a kind of managing group dynamics and making everybody feel heard and seen and gotten rather than having to show up every week with a profound new idea.
So you've done it, you enjoyed it, you realize there's a lot of stuff you could improve in the way that it was structured, offered, delivered. Totally agree with you. I think it should be 90 days. I think, and I'm being very prescriptive because this is my zone of genius. I'm on my 18th cohort doing this. I think a 90-day program to have a very specific promise. I think a $10,000 price point on that. You have very much a peer-to-peer energy in there where, yes, you're leading it. It is your program, your system, but there's a lot of peer-to-peer value that's added. If if you have, yeah, the math gets real easy with a group. I'm kind of excited you said that. But if we just say for now, we have three buckets of offer. We have the one-on-one, a group coaching, and then we have this workshop slash mastermind that I want to talk about last. And say it's 250,000 in each. So 250,000 revenue from one-on-one. You seem very confident that that's kind of like table stakes. That's kind of what you already do. You do one-on-one, you make about that much in revenue, even in sort of coming out of this health crisis zone. A group, the math gets real fun. If it was 10,000 a seat, you only need 25 people the whole year to hit 250K with that part of your model, right? So if you did two cohorts of 12 people each, you had 90 days, just did one in this January and one in September, because that's when people love to buy groups. And you said 2 90-day programs to start. I really think you could fill that, have 250,000 in revenue from a group. And then the last $250,000 bucket is some workshops. I don't know how many of those you would like to do. But I think the other missing piece in this equation is what I would call a continuity offer, right? A subscription offer, if you will. I think in your case, you said the word community, which I agree with, but I really think you're in a prime position to host a mastermind. And mastermind, and the way I use that word, it's a small, tight knit community of people on a common mission, and that it's peer to peer, but it's not a community in the sense that it's like $50 a month and you get a whole bunch of like resources. It is a personal experience and people that really know each other and trust each other in a deep way. And I think you could fill a mastermind with a combination of one-on-one clients and group coaching clients. And then now you've got the same marketing that brings you one-on-one. And then the people that don't want to do one-on-one or who prefer a group, go to the group. That same marketing engine fuels both those. And then the 10 to 20% of people who get to the end of that engagement and like, I really want this ongoing support. I want, all the things that come with the community. It's like, great, I have a small group mastermind. It's, whatever, 10,000, 20,000, whatever for the year. And then that is something you do where you can do, there's lots of different formats to that on how you would lead it, but you could have a little bit of an in-person component. I know you like to do some in-person stuff. You could host some people in Southern California or whatever, but let's say let's just call it a $25,000 group right now, for the year. 10 people in a mastermind is 250,000. 20 people in a group coaching program at 10K, or 25 people is 250,000. And then, at roughly 10 to 15,000 a client, on the one-on-one, you only need 10 to 20, depending on kind of where they fall on that spectrum. About 20 at 12.5. So 20 one-on-ones, 25 groups, and then that's 45 total humans. And then the mastermind is completely fed by those two groups, right? Like you could let people into the mastermind directly, but largely it would just be filled by outflows from the two group coaching programs you do a year and the one-on-ones. How does all that feel? Is just like in a volume, sort of like structure, sustainability, scalability standpoint?
I mean, it feels pretty doable, like that.
I think it's totally doable. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've, in a way, I've done all those pieces one way or another. And so, and I'm trying to, picture the flow of my weeks and my months and things. It definitely feels doable.
2 one-on-one clients a month, and we're running one group for part of the year and then running the mastermind throughout the year. Depending on how frequently you want to meet.
Yeah, I mean, 2 90-day things, 2 90-day sprints in January and September. Okay,
And then if we go and we work with John to be a TED-worthy communicator, and then basically the options are one-on-one with John at a premium, or come into our group. I wouldn't even say it's not at a premium. That's just a different option. Some people prefer group. It is more affordable. Some people really like that peer-to-peer. I generally always do groups. I don't really want to be one-on-one coach. I like the group dynamic. And so we're going all the way back to those three big buckets. We have the business leaders, the entrepreneurs, and the stage pursuers. Generally speaking, you're probably going to get mostly one-on-one for the business leaders. And generally speaking, it gives you a very good spot to put the entrepreneurs and the stage pursuers and some of the business leaders into this group bucket. Any of them, if they are sort of in the top 10% of your client base could be eligible for your mastermind, and you could select who gets into that. And then your mastermind now has a lot of great business leaders, but it also has entrepreneurs, and it also has other experts and authors and people doing professional speaking. I think that makes for a very rich mastermind experience for an ongoing group dynamic standpoint. So I like all that. I mean, as far as like just a structure of like, but I think this is all doable by 2026. You'd roll these out sequentially where you prioritize one, get it going, then prioritize the next. In this case, you may be able to form a mastermind based on all your client roster that you can pull from. Um, or you could, make a goal to maybe launch a group in January with a much tighter promise for a price where it's 10,000, it's 90 days. This is exactly what we're going to accomplish together. And the year long thing is both harder to sell and harder to fulfill. So that's our revised business model, John. It's we need 40 to 50 total clients that are interested in TED worthy communication as business leaders. That's going to create a pipeline, or it's going to come from a pipeline into one-on-one and group programs, and those two both feed out into an ongoing mastermind. If you get to a point where you're really wanting to step down, or step out, you can have other people run the group, even other people run the one-on-one, and maybe the mastermind becomes your personal playground where you get paid really well to treat your best clients, and that sort of your semi-retirement plan, right? So then the question, there's not a huge volume, but then the question becomes, where do we find one ideal client a week, basically? Because that is really what you need to have 40 to 50 new clients coming into this pipeline. And I don't have to sell you on it.
That's kind of where my stomach falls, is like, oh yeah, I got to find them, right?
Maybe this was preordained because you know who I am and what I do. But you said it earlier, like, I really believe that podcast guesting and partnerships are a big part of how I should be doing marketing. I agree. Someone who's a gifted communicator, a natural speaker, a storyteller. I think long form educational content where you can tell your own story, you can tell your client stories, and use that as the lighthouse, the magnet that attracts your ideal clients to you. I think that's totally it. And so if we're talking about podcasting, specifically podcast guesting, so uh, I'll let you start this, and then I'll add maybe some nuance to it. But if I said, hey, you only get to be on 10 podcasts next year, we won't worry about the names of the podcast, but if you had to describe what type of podcast, who listens to the podcast, who's the host, like what feels like the right place to put your talents, if our primary focus is getting top business leaders as our bullseye and realizing other people will be on the dartboard and kind of come to us naturally through this focused effort.
I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, like, I don't really know, but I would imagine I would want to be on podcasts that were being listened to by top business leaders, right? And if there's a focus on continuous improvement, that's probably really good.
What other, when you think of your favorite clients, and they or their company are spending good money on you for communication help, and you talk to them over a beer or tea or whatever, what else are they investing in? Like, what other things do they feel like they need help with to be top executives?
That's a really good question. And I need to have more beers or cups of teas with my clients, is what you're making me realize right now, And it's interesting because I spend so much one-on-one, super deep time in my one-on-one coaching things, but I haven't made a habit of asking those kinds of questions, which I easily could. So I think there's a huge opportunity for me there to get to know my clients as well as I think I know them on one hand. Like, I don't know them at all on the other hand in that way. And that's a huge missing and a huge opportunity.
And the good news is you can have these conversations now with current clients. You can have for the ones that you have a 92 net promoter score as seen on LinkedIn. You have a great relationship with your past clients. It's a very easy ask. You just need a reason to ask. So you can go back and be like, hey, I'm working with a new business coach and we're getting really refined on my business. One of his questions that I honestly couldn't answer was, what are the top line items in your professional development budget? Because that's going to start to tell you what conferences they invest in, what other coaches, consultants, agencies they work with. And what I'm looking for here are centers of influence who serve your ideal client in a different way. There's the direct route, and I'm purposefully sort of being obtuse with this. Like, business leaders do listen to business leadership podcasts, right? So there's a direct route here, John, without getting into the partnership part of this, where it's like, hey, John should be on podcasts where these leaders listen, but also probably more easily found is actually where they are featured as experts. So who's the podcast host who's inviting your ideal clients to be the featured expert to talk about leadership, uh, technology, since you're in a lot of tech spaces, AI, like, hey, this is the vice president of blah 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 at Procter and Gamble. He's going to come on and teach us this stuff. That is your ideal client. And so how do we then put you in proximity to that person? Well, that same podcast that wants to know what this leader is, what's the current business challenge, or the next forefront of business leadership in tech space or whatever, you can slide right into that as a guest, as someone who works with these people, and you have an insider look into the importance of communication in the workplace, the importance of communication in the age of AI, right? Like, how important their own story and origin story is to their success as a leader, when a lot of the people are talking about just make an AI version of them, let them lead the company, like, and the whole idea is, let's get you on a podcast where a lot of your ideal clients are being interviewed. They may also be the host. Some of these people like to host podcasts. And now you're in that ecosystem, and becomes a very natural extension for you to Joe, Mary, and John, three other executives who have been on the same show. Hey, Joe, I was recently on this show talking about communication for executives. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. You have 25,000 followers. You've got a really good credibility there. Hey, Jane, same thing. You just connect with these people that are guests on this in the same ecosystem. They like to talk and teach. They're an executive. They're into communication and storytelling because they're on podcasts talking about this stuff and teaching. And you already like to work with the best of the best. So then it's like, as the conversation ensues, you're like, hey, I know that you work at Procter and Gamble. I used to work with Jerry Sue over in this division. Or, hey, I know you work at Boeing. I've actually had a bunch of clients at NASA. You've got all this like credibility over 15 years of, it's easy for you to make connections to things that would seem relevant to these individuals at their companies. So that's one sort of on the nose podcast guesting strategy, is like, let's just get you on shows that get you in proximity to your ideal clients. So I'll take a breath there, and then we can talk more about strategic partnerships and this like idea of centers of influence. But how does that land? Is that too obvious? Or you're like, there's obviously a whole nother, it'd be a different show for a different time, of like the strategy of, once you're on there, how do we actually like make this a pipeline of quality leads? That's what we do in our program. But the main thing is like, what do you think of the strategy overall of getting you on these types of shows and letting you do your magic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good strategy. I think it's pretty on the nose, but it's like, there's a reason that it's on the nose, because it would probably really work.
Yeah. And again, we only need 50 clients. So if we get you on one podcast a week and you get one client, some you'll get 4, some you'll get 0, but it'll average out. I think that's a very sustainable, repeatable process. You already have a part-time virtual assistant. That's part of what we do, is we train them to do all the legwork. So you literally are just showing up on the podcast. They're doing the front end, finding and pitching the podcast. They're doing the back end of getting those conversations going that lead to people in your pipeline. And these aren't cold outreach at this point. These are ideal clients you've selected based on the criteria that you've established. And you have the borrowed credibility of a host that has had you both on their show. So you're in the cool kids club, you're backstage at TEDx, and it's like, hey, we're all in the same room here, right? So I think that is like a for sure strategy. It becomes a faucet you can turn on and turn off. You could, hey, this summer I'm not doing any, but maybe in the fall I'm going to do 2 a week because I want to ramp things up. The final thing I want to talk about, so we talked a lot about your offers. I think we've got a lot of clarity on structure, pricing, a cohesive strategy where these marketing activities we're talking about can feed into a very scalable business. And then on the marketing side, I think podcast guesting and the way we described it is a natural place for you to thrive. The other place I really want to try to get a little bit of meat on the bone in the last 5 minutes that we have here is partnerships. So where can we put you in addition to podcasts that would put you in in a place where the referrals are now predictable. So, in other words, we started talking about this a minute ago. Who else serves your ideal client in a different way? And so, have you been thinking about that since we brought it up 5 minutes ago?
Yeah. And one of the things that I realize is that when I look at who I'm actually working with right this very minute, one of the greatest lead sources I've had over the last year as I made my comeback is that I went and spoke for free and flew myself in and whatever to be at some of these other mastermind groups, right? So, there's a woman named Michelle Villalobos, and she had me come help her people at a live mastermind, and they freaking all fell in love with me. And it took some of them a while to convert, but that they were people who were with her, and what I brought was something they really wanted along with that. And another guy named Tommy Breedlove, I've done a bunch of free stuff for him, and all of a sudden a number of people from his masterminds have been reaching out and like, John, it's finally time. So that's definitely when you say what other things are they investing in, they're investing in, like, go get them. You are serious about your success. You're a go-getter, like that kind of a mastermind that's not around what I do, or even that it is tangentially around what I do. That's definitely a place where some of my clients are coming from. So clearly they're investing in that stuff.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. If we kind of hit a wall, was like, well, we can definitely go talk to your top clients and see where else they're spending money on personal development, or their company is spending money on professional development. My next question was going to be, but surely you're getting some leads from some pools of influence, and you found one there with masterminds. Because I was thinking of two.
Yeah. I mean, and that is where I met Eric Colette, which is how I met you, is Tommy Breedlove, so.
Okay, there you go. That's right. There you go. So we're a living, breathing example of the power of this partnership strategy. Because I was thinking too, so in these business leaders, they've got like maybe their personal budget, how they spend money to make themselves better, right? And it could be a book writing coach, it could be a speaking coach from the stage, it could be a mastermind, it could be a lot of these things, right? And then they have this other hat at work where they probably have some substantial budget for professional development for themselves and their employees. That's like, what consultants do we bring in? What training do we bring in? What fractional executive help do we have, or tax strategy, or depending on their industry and their role, right? So let's say, it's, I don't know if this is a great example, but let's say it's a tax strategist, right? Or fractional CFO or something like that, depending on the company size. Well, that person serves your ideal clients in several different companies, right? And you don't do what they do, and they don't do what you do. And so that's where you have this conversation, and you do referrals, of course, but you can also do this guest training where it's like, hey, we'll go with their mastermind, since that's actually been working. So then it's just like, well, every week John's going to be on a podcast. He can do that in 30 to 45 minutes from the comfort of his home. Someone else is doing all the logistics. Let's say once a month you have this goal of lining up guest training, embedded partnerships, right? Where you're going to a mastermind, or you're going to a conference, or you're going to this fractional executive association or whatever, and you're being the resident expert on TEDx worthy communication. That's a huge part of my strategy. Basically, my whole business has been built to 7 figures doing podcast guesting, and then I do a lot of guest training. I surface those guest training opportunities largely from podcasting. I did a training just before we recorded this morning, kind of showing, hey, in the past 10 weeks, here's all the places I've been doing guest training in people's private communities, masterminds, and in an event, all from podcast guesting being like how I found my way into those opportunities. But I think if you do the math of one podcast guest appearance a week and one per month of these deeper embedded trainings, you've got a predictable marketing system that doesn't really require much sophistication. It doesn't require paid ads. It's all relationship based, which I already know is your strong suit anyway. And you're building a flywheel. So the first year of this, you're putting in the reps, you're doing the outreach, you're finding the opportunities. You can definitely lean on your past clients for shortcuts. But as you get this rolling, it becomes a self-perpetuating machine, and a lot of these opportunities start to come to you because you're the authority. People know you, they hear about you in someone else's group, and oh, I run a mastermind, come speak to my group. And by the way, John, what's really cool if you start to sell a lot through other people's masterminds is that when you have your own, uh, people who like to be in masterminds like to be in masterminds, right? So like if these people become your clients, they're very naturally going to want to be in your mastermind because they already believe in that model and invest in it. I'm just like I like to teach, I like to come in and guest train in group coaching programs. It's like, hey, if people are spending money on a premium group coaching program because that's how they like to learn and connect with people, well, maybe mine's the next one they want to be in. And in the same way, selling in the modality that you deliver can be really powerful. So I purposely was like jamming a lot in there. We got like 2 minutes left, but is this feeling like you're getting some momentum out of this conversation at least?
I'm really glad that we did this. Thank you.
Good. What's your most useful takeaway, and then we'll tell people how to get a hold of you, and we'll wrap up this session.
I mean, so I'm going to go kind of meta on this. I think my most useful takeaway is that I kind of came in here feeling sort of hopeless about my top of funnel. You know what I mean? And I'm leaving feeling like it's maybe much more simple than I've been making it, and it's not nearly as hopeless as I've been making it. And like maybe I don't even have to figure out how to do freaking Facebook ads that I hate. Yeah, you know what I mean?
You really don't. I've never ran one for two seven-figure businesses, and I think what you said is important for people listening who are like top of funnel. That's the idea that like, oh, I got to interrupt people and let them get to know who I am to pull them down into an awareness that they can actually become a client. Everything I've described to you, John, we are leveraging your strengths. We're borrowing trust from people that want to give us trust, like a podcast host or a mastermind host. And we are meeting people with deep, meaningful, long form educational content. It kind of skips the whole top of funnel. You basically, people meet you in the middle of the funnel and can get to the quote unquote bottom of the funnel and want to set up a call to work with you in one interaction, which is very different than traditional digital marketing, Facebook ads, and all that. So I appreciate you articulating. Any quick reaction to that?
You're just yeah, absolutely. You're right. You like bingo.
Cool. Well, I love this time. As people listening to these series know, I mean, we could talk for 3 hours, but we try to limit ourselves to about an hour here. So if people are like, I actually need some John Bates in my life, I could use some TED worthy communication skills. What's the best place to send people to connect with you directly, John?
So they can go to, like, it's easy to remember johnbates.com, but that's a little more about me and my keynotes. Executivespeakingsuccess.com is the website where I go more into my corporate training and my one-on-one executive coaching. I'm also really active on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/John Bates. And those would be the places to find me. And if you come DM me on LinkedIn, or if you send me an email from the website, either of the websites, I'll respond personally. So, happy to hear from people. And if people are interested in seeing a little more about what I do, I'm super active on LinkedIn. So
I love it. Well, you've done a good job claiming John Bates, which is just JOHN and then BATES. Like, so he has John Bates on LinkedIn, johnbates.com. And then the executive speaking success.com. So, well, John, I really appreciate your transparency. I got a little emotional with some of your story, but I love it. I believe in you. I know that like you should just go all in on relationship building at scale by teaching and coaching people, which is what you already love to do. I think you just need the right system around it to capture all the energy and outflow that comes from it. And look forward to following along with your success.
okay, thank you, Dustin. I really appreciate your time. This is super valuable. You're good at what you do, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, everyone listening, stay tuned. We got more coming in our coaching series. So catch the next one.